year 5 and 6. Me, Mr. A, back with story time for another day, and chapter 10 of Tom's Midnight Garden by Philippa Pearce. Chapter 10, Games and Tales. Tom was half inclined to believe her at first. Her gaze was very bright and steady, and with her red cheeks and long black hair and stiff little dignity, there was perhaps something regal about her, something of a picture book queen. Immediately behind her was the dark green background of a yew tree. In one hand she held up a twig of yew she had broken off in nervousness, or to play with. In the other hand she held her half-eaten apple. She held the two things like a queen's sceptre and orb. "You may kiss my hand," she said. "I don't want to," said Tom. He added, "Thank you," as an afterthought, in case she really were a princess, but he had his suspicions. If you're a princess, your father and mother must be a king and queen. Where's their kingdom? Where are they? I'm not allowed to say. Why not? She hesitated, and then said, I am held here a prisoner. I am a princess in disguise. There is someone here who calls herself my aunt, but she isn't so. She is wicked and cruel to me. And those aren't my cousins either, although I have to call them so. Now you know my whole secret. I will permit you to call me Princess. She stretched out her hand towards him again, but Tom ignored it. And now, she said, I will allow myself to play with you. I don't mind playing, said Tom doggedly, but I'm not used to playing silly girls' games. Come with me, said the girl. She showed him the garden. Tom had thought that he knew it well already, but now, with Hattie, he saw places and things he had not guessed at before. She showed him all her hiding places, a leafy crevice between a wall and a tree trunk, where a small human body could just wedge itself, a hollowed-out centre to a box bush, and a run leading to it, like the run made in the hedge in the meadow. A wigwam shelter made by a rearrangement of the bean sticks that Abel had left leaning against the side of the heating house, a series of hidey holes behind the fronds of the great ferns that grew along the side of the greenhouse, a feathery green tunnel between the asparagus ridges. She showed Tom how to hide from a search simply by standing behind the trunk of a big fir tree. You had to listen intently, to move exactly, and noiselessly, of course, so that the trunk was always between yourself and the searcher. Hattie showed Tom many things he could not have seen for himself. When she was lifting the sacking over the rhubarb tubs to show him the sticks of rhubarb, Tom remembered something. Did you once leave a written message here? Did you once find one? Asked Hattie. Yes, a letter to fairies. Tom did not hide the disgust he had felt. Fairies. Whoever could have put it there, Hattie wondered. To fairies. Just fancy. She pulled a grimace, but awkwardly, and she changed the subject quickly. Come on, Tom, I'll show you more. She opened doors for him. She unlatched the door into the gooseberry wire, and they went in. Among the currant bushes at the end they found a blackbird that must have squeezed by in a less official entrance. Attracted by the fruit, the bird beat its wings frantically against the wire at their approach, but they manoeuvred round it and then drove it before them down the gooseberry wire and out, in a glad rush through the door they had left open. It's lucky we found it, said Hattie. I'm afraid that Abel... She shook her head. I really think he'd rather see birds starving than eating his fruit. For Tom, she opened the orchard door from the sundial path, and then the door into the potting shed. Among the tools and seed boxes and flower pots and rolls of chicken wire, they found a sack full of feathers, hen feathers and goose feathers. Hattie dug her fingers in and threw them up into the air in a brown and white storm, so thick that even Tom thought he felt a tickling on his nose and sneezed. Then Hattie crept over the floor, laughing, and picked up all the fallen feathers and put them back, because otherwise Abel would be angry. Tom sat on the side of the wheelbarrow and swung his legs and pointed out any stray feathers still drifting down. He could not have helped Hattie, he knew that. With both hands and all his force, he could not have lifted even a feather's weight. Meanwhile, Hattie, on her hands and knees, seemed to have forgotten that she was a princess. After that, they went to the little brick-built heating house at the end of the greenhouse, and Hattie set about opening that door for Tom. She was far too small to be able to reach the flat square of iron that latched the top of the door, but standing on tiptoe and straining upward with her yew twig, she was finally able to poke it aside. She opened the door, and they went down steps into the darkness, and the smell of rust and cold cinders. The weather was so warm that the stove for the greenhouse was not working. There was a small shelf with 2 or 3 books on it that Hattie said belonged to Abel. The shelf was just out of reach, but they could see that the topmost book of the pile was a Bible. Abel says the Bible must be above all the other books, like the Queen ruling over all England. They went into the greenhouse, among the cacti and the creepers that swayed down from their roof-suspended cage pots, and plants with strange flowers that could never be expected to live, like other plants out of doors. Tom gasped for breath in the greenhouse, and wondered how they endured the stifling air. There was a castor oil plant. Tom felt a little sick when Hattie named it. There was a sensitive plant too, and Hattie showed Tom how, when she touched a leaf tip, the whole frond dropped and shrank from her by folding itself together. The plant's sensitivity was something quite out of the ordinary. It seemed to feel even Tom's touch. He was so delighted that he worked his fingers over the whole plant and left it in one droop of nervous dejection. Then they leant over the water tank and tried to see the goldfish, and tried to catch them. Hattie bared her arm to plunge it in, and Tom laid his arm along hers and behind it, with his open hand behind hers, finger to finger, so as with one arm and one hand they dipped into the water and hunted. Tom could have done nothing by himself, but when Hattie very nearly caught a fish, Tom's hand seemed one with hers in the catching. Then Hattie led Tom back to the doorway of the greenhouse and showed him the coloured panes that bordered the glass panelling of the upper half. Through each colour of pane you could see a different garden outside. Through the green pane Tom saw a garden with green flowers under a green sky. Even the geraniums were green and black. Through the red pane lay a garden as he might have seen it through the redness of shut eyelids. The purple glass filled the garden with thunderous shadow and with oncoming night. The yellow glass seemed to drench it in lemonade. At each of the four corners of this bordering was a colourless square of glass, engraved with a star. "And if you look through this one," said Hattie. They screwed up their eyes and looked through the engraved glass. "You can't really see anything through the star," said Tom, disappointed. "Sometimes I like that the best of all," said Hattie. "You look and see nothing, and you might think there wasn't a garden at all, but all the time, of course, there is, waiting for you." They went out into the garden again, and Hattie began to tell Tom about the yew trees round the lawn. The one he had climbed and waved from was called the Matterhorn, another tree was called the Lookout, and another the Steps of St. Paul's. One tree was called Trixie because of the difficulty of climbing it. Its main trunk was quite bare for some way up from the ground and could only be swarmed. Hubert and James and Edgar had all swarmed it in their time. Hattie could not swarm. Tom felt superior, princess or no princess. Sometimes Hattie's information seemed doubtful to Tom. They paused by a bushy plant to which Hattie drew attention. "This is the burning bush," she said. She plucked a leaf, rubbed it between her fingers, and then held them up to Tom's nose. He sniffed the fingertips. The smell was of the faintest to him. "Should it be a smell of burning?" he asked doubtfully. "No, James says the smell is of lemon verbena." "Why is it called burning bush then?" "They say that if you come out at midnight on Midsummer's Eve and set a flame to this, the whole plant will blaze up." "How do you know? Have you ever tried?" "No, of course not, because there's only one plant in the garden and we don't want to burn it to ashes." "Oh," Tom supposed to himself that it might be true. Hattie drew nearer to him. "Shall I tell you something? Something secret?" "If you like." "Well, we'll wait and see what that secret is, and we'll find out tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great day, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye."